We are ready to get started. Thank you all for joining us, and I'm going to do this a couple of times, but I want to thank our presenters for coming today to our webinar, and thanks for all of you to tuning in on our kind of abnormal Wednesday, but we're happy to have you. Today we are having the April edition of the National Center webinars. My name is Katie Mencarini, and I will be your facilitator today. All right, and as usual, we've got a couple of housekeeping things to go over. All right, so the first thing is that you all are going to be muted, and I think I have the wrong phone number on there. It was given to you in your email, so all of you should disconnect just fine. I'm seeing a lot of you are already here. All the phones are muted because we just need to cut back on background noise, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We are going to have questions and answers at the end of the presentation. And to do that, just send me a chat in the window, in your GoToWebinar window, and I'll be keeping track of them, and we'll be doing those with our presenters at the end of the presentation. Now, if you have questions on other topics related to Safe Routes to School, use the Ask a Question, Contact Us information, and we'd be happy to follow up with you after the presentation. If you're having any technical difficulties, feel free to email me. I've got that open in another window, and I'm happy to help you as best I can. And last but not least, our webinar will be recorded and uploaded onto the website. So if you missed it or you want to send it to someone else who wasn't able to join us, please do. All right, so with that, let's get started. Today's webinar is maximizing the benefits of play and outdoor time in your Safe Routes to School program. First, we're going to hear from Fran Manella. And we've got a lot of list of credentials here. She's the co-chair of the U.S. Play Coalition. She's a board member of the Children and Nature Network, and she's the former director of the U.S. National Park Service. And she'll talk a little bit about her experience there. Fran is going to talk about the benefits that children and adults can get from being outside with nature and from time spent on unstructured play. She makes a really great case for why children should get regular exposure to the outdoors. In fact, you might find yourself taking more walks on your lunch breaks or visiting parks on the weekends after you listen to Fran's presentation. Then we're going to hear from Adina Cox, a PhD candidate in design and research assistant at the Natural Learning Initiative at North Carolina State University. And Adina's been doing some great research, and she's going to tie in today's theme with Safe Routes to School efforts. So kind of drive it home for how you can do it back in your community. Her research has yielded insights on the benefits for children get by spending time outside, and also how to apply those lessons to everyday trips. She's really getting to both the whys and the hows for getting nature into your Safe Routes to School program. You do not want to miss her 10 ideas for choosing walking and biking routes to school with a mind for incorporating nature and play. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Fran.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? I hope so. And are you able to see my screen yet, Katie? Is it showing up?
Not yet. Did you see the button?
Yes. Okay. There it goes. Whoops. See? Wasn't supposed to be in that position, but let me bring it back up to where it belongs and get us started. Okay. Can you see it now?
It's perfect. Go for it.
All right. Well, good day, everyone. I know some of you it's morning and some it's the afternoon, but we're going to be focusing on the benefits of play and connecting children to the outdoors. And I just want to thank all of you for all the good work that you all do for your safe routes. You are such an important piece of making sure that we have excellent experiences for everyone. Thank you for all that you do. Again, you've seen my introduction, but also I wanted to share with you my background also comes where I was state park director for Florida. I also was a municipal park and recreation director. I have been involved with trails through many different efforts and connecting young people back outdoors. And of course, I started my life as I worked my way through college to be a summer playground counselor. So it's all about getting outdoors. And thank you for again the work that you've been doing. Let's go on to our first slide if we can. First of all, what's happening today? We want to know, most of you already know this, but I just kind of want to re-emphasize about what's been happening most recently. And today, kids aren't going out to play. If you're like me, I used to come home from school. Mom said go out and play and come back in time for dinner. That's when I also would go out hiking along trails or being on my bike or whatever. And today, a lot of that is not happening, primarily because there is concerns about what we call stranger danger, which is the second bullet there. Also, it's the fact that technology has come on so strong for us, and people are meeting their friends. Instead of going outdoors to play, they are meeting their friends through Facebook and other entities. And so those are things that are challenging today. 70% of mothers that used to report playing outdoors, they're only letting, only 31% of those mothers are letting their children go outside today. And again, they're trying to be good parents, but at the same time, they have fears. Plus also, many of them, both parents are working, and sometimes staying in the house is a way they feel safe for those children. Also, I think most of us may be shocked to realize that children are spending an average of 53 hours per week in front of a TV or computer. That's more than a full-time job. That's more than the time they spend in school. So this has really grown. In fact, over the few years that I've been dealing with the U.S. Play Coalition, that number's grown from what was 44 now to 53. So it's on the increase. One of the other areas that is probably most affecting our children is 24-hour media. We have found that, one, it makes a lot of false images about stranger danger, where the science shows that it's less safe today than it was back many years ago. Even though we just saw what happened in Boston, that was, again, those are all over our television, but it was not stealing a child or having that child molested in that normal way that some of the stranger danger concerns take place. So that's one of the areas. The stories repeat, and parents then get very fearful to let their children go out onto our trails or be outdoors as much as we would like to see them. I know that's why a lot of them drive their children to school instead of possibly letting them walk or get into some of the other methods that many of you are using to help parents feel safe to allow the children to go to school by bike or walking. The social networking, we already mentioned, the Facebook. We have so many others, LinkedIn, other things. Those are all here to stay, but it's all about a balance, finding a way to have time outdoors, but also an opportunity still to be connecting through social media. Those are going to take place. We use social media as a tool to be able to communicate why it's important to get outdoors. Many of you know Richard Louv. He's the author of Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. He's actually has written and coined that word of nature deficit disorder, and it has taken on such a great prominence that he's been on the Today Show and many other areas trying to realize that we do have a crisis underway about getting our children back outdoors and particularly connected with nature. Most recently, he's written the book Nature Principle. And this is, he states in there about a widening circle of researchers believe that our disconnection from nature has enormous implications for human health and child development. Again, also this is an important piece, that exposure to nature affects our health at almost all levels. And this is a piece that I think is very important because health and well-being are all linked to what we do about getting our folks on outdoors, connecting and being on their bikes or hiking or whatever. These are important pieces. I'll be the incoming chair for the Children in Nature Network come January of 2014. I'm currently the vice chair and the treasurer for that organization. Also, Rich talks about some of the benefits that connecting with nature takes place, and this might help you as you try to further justify more of our bike routes, more of our hiking, more reasons why it's important to get outdoors on those safe routes. One, it makes you happier. Nature play actually increases self-esteem, improves your psychological health, and reduces stress. I know for me, it certainly is one of the tools I use when I felt stress in national parks. In fact, after 9/11, I was director during 9/11, and I needed to be outdoors and hike. Went to hike the Billy Goat Trail at the C&O Canal, for those of you who know that one, in Washington, D.C., one of our national park units. And it lowered my blood pressure and gave me some chance to reduce my stress. It was really important time for me right after following 9/11. And also I think children learn self-discipline, and they're usually more cooperative. That's why recess is so important too. We find that is a piece that is important for helping children learn, but also being better in the classroom as far as behavior. The healthier piece, again, I mentioned that earlier, nature play improves the physical conditioning and reduces obesity. I know many of you already have focused a great deal on how many calories are burned by walking along our safe routes and things like that, but obesity is an important issue because it is a crisis, as you all know, and I think nature play helps so much in getting people up off that sofa or out of that car and being able to be more physically healthy and in better condition. The piece that I also want to stress is it also helps make children smarter. The studies show that actually if you have a chance to be outdoors, also to have recess or any parts that have nature linked together, it stimulates creativity and improves problem solving, so children do better in school. They come across as being much smarter as we go forth. On to our next slide. Again, part of the health and well-being piece. I just think that's so important. This is a picture of our current chair of the Children in Nature Network Board of Directors, and that's Howard Frumpkin, Dr. Howard Frumpkin. I knew him first from the Centers for Disease Control. He was here in Atlanta. I'm at Clemson University right now, so that's just down the road a couple hours. And but he really linked closely with Rich Louv on this and thought it was so important that he came out that really where we're at is that contact with nature is actually a land conservation strategy and a public health strategy. So he linked land conservation and health all together. He's gone on now to the state of Washington, where he's the Dean of Health there at the University of Washington, and is continuing to promote the fact that it is so important to view being connected with nature, being outside, and land conservation as part of good health, a good health strategy. As we go forth, again, linked to that health and well-being, playtime particularly now, I want to focus on unstructured types of play, not just sports, because that is certainly still important, but the unstructured, where we're on a trail and we're looking at the stars, or of course that's at nighttime, but if you're looking, you know, at the clouds and depicting what you see there, it creates imagination. Also increases your observation skills and your ability to be more wholesome as a child. And again, this is coming from Howard Frumpkin and Richard Louv in their comments. Another part that many don't know is, again, links back to being smarter and more capable, is that Hera Morano from Psychology Today spoke at our conference here at Clemson University on the value of play, and she talked about the frontal lobe of the brain. The development of that requires free play for full development and for a child/adult success. In other words, if you do not give that opportunity for some of that unstructured play, you will not find that the child will develop and be as successful as fully because that frontal lobe of the brain has not fully developed. So what's the problem? You know, what are the other things that are happening when we don't have that play out there, when we're not being able to provide those opportunities? I think one of the particular ones that maybe many of you recognize is that the cognitive development has decreased. And with cognitive development, decision-making, creativity, and imagination all have decreased. I see that so regularly in my college students here at Clemson. They're really hesitant in making some of those decisions, and I don't see that creativity and imagination taking place because many of them are the ones that would not raise their hand as having been outdoors to play when they came home from school. Also, the social development piece. Again, the social interaction, the rage control. Being able, that's one of the arguments we give also on why recess is so important, why behavior is so much better and learning takes place more effectively in schools if they're allowed to be outdoors and play, because it does reduce a lot of the rage that might build up. They're better behaved in that classroom, but it does also allow that social interaction They learn to be able to play together and communicate in eye to eye, and we think that's very important. Another piece of linked to that social development is attention deficit disorder. Many of you know that this is pretty much an epidemic for our younger people today, and that it's at a much greater level than it was back when I certainly was growing up. And what we found is that the play, being outdoors with nature, as it would be on some of your trails, will certainly improve the health and well-being for those that are diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. It doesn't cure it, but it does reduce the symptoms. So it's pretty successful in that direction. Again, about the brain development, this goes back to what we mentioned earlier with Hiram Morano. Again, that's what's necessary for full development of a child. And I think this piece on the breakdown of the community, one of the pieces that I think has been a problem of us not playing together or hiking along those trails as regularly as we should, we are not communicating as effectively, and the community is not linked together. As you know, your trails and your safe routes are linkages, and somehow during the, if we don't have a chance to use those as effectively and play on those and walk and talk as we go, the community effect breaks down. So we want to try to rebuild our community. Again, this is something I know you're familiar with, again on the healthy obesity piece, but back in 1960, 4% of children were obese. Now comparatively at this point, this is a 2008 number, it was at nearly 20%. It's been growing since that. And 74 million children are either dangerously overweight or actually diagnosed as obese. And the one I think you're also probably familiar with is this realization that our current generation, even with all the science that's out there, all the medical technology, the youth today may be the first to live shorter lives than their parents due to the lifestyle of not walking, not getting outside as we want them to do. So these are important issues. Attention deficit disorder, again, we've mentioned that, and we've tried to just remind everyone that the studies like at University of Illinois and others have showed that the symptoms are reduced drastically after being outdoors, camping, fishing, or just getting away from the video games and getting outdoors. And time spent, again, reduces those symptoms. I think a piece that was very significant for us came out from Kuo and Taylor, where their research showed that a 20-minute walk in the park reduced that severity of children, for children with attention deficit disorder. What also, though, they differentiated, I didn't put it on the slide, but they differentiated it a bit, that being more in walking in urban settings or in neighborhoods were not quite the same reduction. It still were beneficial, so we don't want to make that lesson, but it is certainly greater if they can have the nature involvement through a park. The health and well-being, again, continues with fewer than 25% of school children participate in daily physical activities. Being on those safe trails and the safe routes that you're working on, that's part of that 25%, so we appreciate all that you're doing, but we need to have more if we possibly can. Also, many schools are canceling recess. 40% of children now showing signs of cardiac risk as a result of not being active. And this canceling of recess is linked to the No Child Left Behind, particularly where principals and teachers are feeling that they have to pass these tests at certain levels, so they're canceling recess, labeling it, well, I could have the kids study more math or science. But what the science really shows is that if you give them those opportunities for recess and opportunities to play, they will actually score better, even in math and science. One of our partners that's come on so aggressively to promote that play is such an important piece and reconnecting with nature outside is the Academy of Pediatrics. They particularly are focusing on 60 minutes of open-ended play. That's that unstructured play every day for children. And they feel this is critical for the health and well-being of all our young people. And this also ties, as the first paragraph shows, linking to the importance of recess. I've just come out with a recent article too on that I when they will get into this PowerPoint, but it is something that continues to be a great focus for the Academy of Pediatrics. Unstructured free play in out of doors brings a host of benefits to children, from higher levels of cognitive development to being more cooperative to achieving better physical health. And that's Teresa Casey from The Value of Play. And again, these things you probably know, but they may be pieces of information you can use to help justify further as you go after more budget or opportunities to promote the safe routes to schools. Also, Dr. Stephen Kaplan, who is a former member of the Children in Nature Network Board of Directors, talks about the restorative benefits of nature and how those natural environments turn out to be so rich and help restore that health and well-being. Just like that story I gave you about hiking that Billy Goat Trail, I just know not only did my blood pressure go down, but my stress went down, and being able to look out over the, remember this would have been fall of 2001, looking across those wonderful, the foliage and the canal waters, and having hiked that bit up that Billy Goat Trail, it was just such a restorative benefit for me, and that's where I think it helps so many of us. Stuart Brown, many of you may know Stuart Brown. He's a medical doctor, but he's now formed the Institute for Play, and he's quoted in Time magazine saying, "Play deprivation can lead to depression, hostility, and the loss of things that make us human beings." He was commissioned in Texas to do an analysis of people that were in jail, murderers in particular, of why were they murderers, why were they in jail, why had they been a problem. And what he found that was missing is they did not play. They did not have that play, particularly outdoor play, taking place in their lives. And so he, even though he's still a medical doctor, he has now focused so much on play by creating this Institute for Play and becoming a world-renowned speaker on it because of the fact he thinks it's critical, and if we do not deal with it, we will have more folks that are not doing the right, behaving correctly, and again, dealing with play deprivation is very negative, as far as if you don't deal with it, I should say. All right, actions underway. Just want to highlight a few actions underway. America's Great Outdoors. Current President Obama has been very successful, and I think in helping us move forward on that. Let's Move Outside. The First Lady has been very instrumental. If you see the picture in the with John Jarvis, current National Park Service Director, and Secretary Salazar, who's just stepped down as Secretary for Interior, all focusing on this Let's Move Outside efforts. Children in Nature Network, of course, we provide so many materials for you, so please go onto those websites and see how we can help you further. Those, I know all of those are free and are available to you. Also, the National Park Trust. I serve on that board of directors right now, and we're having May 18th as our Kids to Parks National Day. We'll have events on the Mall in Washington, D.C., but all across the United States, and hope that you'll be involved. But again, that's another opportunity to link our safe routes to those parks for that day. Also, we've created the U.S. Play Coalition here at Clemson University, but it's an international partnership to promote the value of play throughout life, and it's made up of individuals and organizations that recognize play as a valuable and necessary part of health and productive life. This has been wonderful for me being here. I came to Clemson from National Parks, from being Director of National Park Service 6.5 years ago, because I knew they'd give me freedom to go after some of the issues I thought were important. And I watched the attendance in our national parks and even our state parks prior to that going down a bit. And part of that is our children were not coming back to our parks because they didn't really want to get outside, get dirty, or get too overheated. They really wanted to stay inside a bit more. So to me, it was a crisis, and also my linkages with Richard Louv with the Children in Nature Network. I knew I needed to work on an effort at Clemson that's now gone international, and that's the U.S. Play Coalition. I want to invite you to our conference, 2014, February the 15th through the 19th here at Clemson University. Also go on our website, join, it's free, doesn't cost anything. The newest actions we're working on is a play prescription to get people back outdoors. Hopefully trails and safe routes would be part of that. Inclusive play, so we involve all different groups of all abilities and capabilities. Speakers Bureau, we're working on that right now, and play ambassadors, so we have all those things underway. Other actions underway are the Children's Bill of Rights in many of your states. I know, I think we have someone on from Colorado. I don't know if we have anyone on from any of the other states that are reflected here, but we do have a Children's Bill of Rights that have taken place, which is the rights to get outdoors and play. So those are things that we want to encourage you to know about and maybe even encourage it in your own state. Many of those were done through governor's orders rather than just state legislature, but some was done through the state legislature. U.S. Forest Service, their Kids in the Woods program, a great one. They continue in that effort, and I think it's something that's very beneficial. Of course, my agency with National Park Service, we worked aggressively in the Junior Ranger program, and in fact, while I was director, we did the Web Ranger program in order to use the technology to encourage people to come back outside, and I think it's been pretty effective with that. Let's look to the future. You are all such an important part of that future. What you do, you're already connecting people with nature, but I just want to encourage us to do more of that, to connect, to get outdoors, and to produce obviously people that all are going to care about those outdoors and be part of our conservationists to the future. Also, the opportunities for hiking and biking and canoeing and those safe routes, that's all such an important piece that you do, and I just want to say thank you to you for doing that. I have to always go back to John Muir, who has been such an influence to all of us throughout all our lives, or certainly through our resources. Everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play and places to pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to body and soul. Take a course in good water and air, and in the eternal youth of nature you may renew your own. And I think that hits us so much for all that we do. My closing slide is just, please remember that play pays. For every additional mile people walk, they add 20 minutes to their lives and save society 34 cents in medical or other societal costs. With that, I just am appreciative to be here. I know we'll have time for questions later on, so Katie, I'm passing it back, or actually, I think I'm passing it right on to Adina. It's all yours.
Thank you, Fran. That's great information about the benefits of nature play. Now my challenge is to provide you with some ideas to make it happen, concrete ideas. Do you guys have my screen there, Katie?
Yeah, looking loud and clear. It looks clear and you sound great.
Okay, good. So my background is primarily in the built environment. I'm working on my PhD at the College of Design at NC State University, a master's in natural resource management and a bachelor's in landscape architecture. So I'm going to try to show you some ideas for making this happen in your neighborhood. I do focus a little bit more on the built environment than some of you do. And I had something else to say that's left my mind right at the moment. Sorry about that. So how do we get this to happen, nature and play, into your safe walk to and from school? We know about backgrounds, especially we know about barriers, especially parental fear, vehicle traffic. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about independent mobility, which is a term you may not be familiar with. I'm going to share some of my research, which I did for my dissertation, and I'm going to try to give you concrete ideas for your community. Two of the barriers that I want to talk about is vehicle traffic and parental fear. That was part of the impetus for me to study shared use paths for my dissertation. I was thinking that shared use paths, since they're away from vehicle traffic, might provide opportunities for contact with nature and opportunities for free play, as well as transportation routes for children. Independent mobility is a term that came about primarily from this book, One False Move, a study of children's independent mobility. that was done written in 1990, and they were looking at school children in England and in Germany. And not only do we have a decrease in active transportation, which you guys are the experts in, but we also have a decrease in independent mobility. And we can define independent mobility as the ability of children and adolescents to walk and cycle around their neighborhood without adult accompaniment. And that's usually groups of children traveling together with siblings, friends, and sometimes pets. So why is independent mobility important? Scaffolding. Children can learn to navigate the environment one step at a time. It's like if you're going to try to teach your child how to swim, you don't throw them in the ocean. You get them used to bubble baths and floaties and take them to swim lessons and then let them swim on their own. The same thing with active transportation. We want children to learn gradually how to make these decisions. Children who are independently mobile have more access to their environment. They're able to move about, especially you look at 10, 11, 12-year-olds when their parents are at work in the afternoon. If they are allowed to be outside independently, they can access their parks and their friends' houses and the grocery stores and things like that that are important to them. They can access nature if it's nearby. They can access opportunities for free play, physical activity, and opportunities to be social. Roger Mackett, who's a researcher in the UK, says children learn how to make decisions, build up social networks, acquire knowledge by observation and experimentation. Also, it allows them to enjoy themselves and be active. Children don't want to get physical activity for the sake of physical activity. That's a difficult concept for them. But fun and play is not difficult for them to understand. It's a great motivator. So some of the literature on independent mobility, we know that children walk differently when they're not with their parents, with adults. They tend to go directly to their destinations. When they are out with their friends, they potter about, which is a British term, of course, in a much more exploratory way. They spend more time playing outdoors. We know that time spent outdoors is associated with physical activity. So they have a stronger sense of community, and they're better at mapping. So that gets back to the cognitive skills that are gained when they're making those decisions where to go next. So traffic is a valid fear. Pedestrians are 3 times more likely in the U.S. than in Germany and 6 times more likely than Dutch to be killed per mile and per trip walked. Also, young children have different abilities for peripheral vision, decision-making, different level of cognitive skills. So it's more difficult for them than for adults to navigate the environment. So traffic is a very valid fear for a lot of children. So my research was a case study research, and I had looked at 4 different cases. Cary and Richardson, Texas were pathways that were along neighborhood greenways. Springfield and Chattanooga were 2 pathways that were in neighborhood parks. So the 2 that were in the parks, Chattanooga and Springfield, as you can see, they're recreation-oriented. They were enriched with play pockets. My research was sponsored by PlayCorps, and they were looking at kind of a post-occupancy evaluation of this concept of putting small pieces of nature-themed play equipment out along the trail to motivate children to use the space. So these were 2 of their demonstration sites, and I was doing like I said, a post-occupancy evaluation. And here's an example of 2 of the play pockets where they're just small pieces of equipment set on just off the side of the trail, off far enough so that they weren't impeding trail traffic, but allowed for kids to access these play pockets. The 2 pathways along greenways, one in Richardson, Texas. As you can see the photo on the left, it's a residential community. There was the school on the right is an elementary school. The school on the left is a middle school. The is a large park with a playground. And here's the Greenway Trail going up and down through the neighborhood. Cary School site, the school is over here in red. The trail goes, this is all residential. This is a higher density condominium development. There's a large park here and a large park over here. So those parks with playgrounds were frequented by children. Whoops, close that. My methods were I did some behavior mapping and asked did parental surveys at all 4 sites. First thing I'm going to share with you is that I was wondering what the kids were actually doing when they were out spending time along these pathways. And my concept was looking at the behaviors that the environment afforded, and then I wanted to look at the environmental characteristics that supported those behaviors. So I coded the behaviors that children were doing. As you can see, here's a sampling of some of the behaviors. There was a wide variety of activities they were participating in. I developed themes, and I did that with my advisor, Robin Moore, and another colleague, Dr. Nilda Costco, and developed these themes: gross motor, fine motor, social interaction with adults, social interactions with peers, and then observing, where children were just observing the activities that were around them, and whether or not they were engaged with nature. The settings that once I coded those behaviors, I looked at where they were happening, and then I developed themes for the behavior settings where these behaviors were occurring in. In the blue, those are resting and viewing areas that were primarily designed for adults, primarily to observe wildlife. The red were the events that were, I call them ephemeral behavior settings because they were created by the events, such as the ducks and the geese appearing or the turtles appearing, or if a child encountered a friend on the walk, that would be an event. The green is just when the activities were taking place on the pathway, as the child was translocating on the pathway. And then the yellow were the activities that were happening in the play pocket on where the manufactured play equipment was. So I found a diversity of behaviors across the settings. You look at the gross motor behaviors, and that was happening primarily on the pathways and also at the play pocket. Fine motor skills, I didn't see a lot of those activities, but again, the ephemeral settings where they were encountering wildlife or nature. Also the resting and viewing areas where they tended to be lingering, sometimes because their parents stopped, sometimes because there were benches there which were utilized. Adult interaction was highest at the play pocket areas. Peer interaction, that's children playing with other children, that was also highest at the play pocket areas. Observing, not surprising, was at the resting and viewing areas, and also the ephemeral areas where they were encountering this wildlife. And the flora and fauna interaction, the wildlife interaction, was primarily also at these resting and viewing areas in these ephemeral sites. So I want to talk a little bit about the role of play equipment. Based on my research and other research that has been conducted, play equipment tends to provide an opportunity for children to encounter other kids. It works as a meeting place. One family with 3 boys said that their children, the boys, didn't want to go to the park with the parents, even though there was a botanical garden that the parents liked to visit, but the children didn't want to go. And once the play pockets were added, then the kids wanted to go. They saw it as a place for children. And their boys were a little bit older, and the dad said that the kids didn't really play on the play equipment for very long, but it still was an attraction to them, and it motivated them to be outside. And that's pretty common in the research, that it's viewed by children as a place to go meet your friends and encounter other kids. Vegetation, the role it plays for children, provides shade, which is extremely important on pathways. In almost every community, whether it's northern or southern, shade is very sought after in the summer days when kids would be expected to be outside. Loose parts for play. There's a theory of loose parts that children are attracted to movable things. It's a helpful way for them to use fine motor skills, to be creative. And vegetation often provides that with seed pods, berries, sticks, leaves, grass. It provides wildlife habitat, which I found children drawn to wildlife in these on all 4 of the pathways. And then, of course, the scenic beauty that vegetation provides. So I found, excuse me, I found wildlife to be a large draw for kids, whether they were chasing ducks and geese, looking at birds. There was one moment where a little boy was trying to rescue a caterpillar that was crawling on the pathway, and he was concerned that someone would step on it. So his father was helping him rescue this caterpillar. So it's a way for kids to maybe gain some sensitivity to other creatures. Maybe they can learn about animals. So they certainly do seem to enjoy watching wildlife. Now I want to talk a little bit about the results of the neighborhood greenway surveys. And again, the 2 sites were Cary and Richardson, and I had some different results that were a little bit surprising. Richardson, Texas is a greenway that's fairly open, that runs through the residential community. The quality of the corridor is got some shade trees, some places it needs more shade trees. But there are a lot of neighboring streets and alleyways, and the houses are pretty visible to the greenway during the entire run of the greenway. Cary, the pathway gets very densely vegetated on the northernmost part where it runs behind people's houses. And there's a lot more shade, a lot of trees, as you can see from the picture. So what I found when I asked this question, which is taken from Hillman's study that I mentioned from 1990, at what age did you or will you allow your child to walk without an adult in your neighborhood? And I was surprised that it was much higher in Richardson than it was in Cary. You see a spike at age 10 where families in Richardson are starting to allow their kids to use the pathways without another adult being present. And you see a more gradual increase in Cary. The mean age in Cary is 12.6, and Richardson's mean was 10.4, also just indicating the younger age in Richardson, that parents were comfortable allowing their children out. When I asked another Hillman question, about what prevented parents from allowing their children to use the pathway, pretty similar in the age of the child. Big difference in fear of molestation, big difference in fear of bullying. So the Cary site parents had more concerns. I might mention the demographics are similar in these 2 neighborhoods. When I asked what might make the trails feel more comfortable to parents, there were also some striking differences. There are more people in Richardson were asking for lighting, which I attribute that to the fact that it seems more urban because of the openness. 20%, 1 in 5 parents mentioned open response on the questionnaire, the woods and the seclusion, preventing them from feeling comfortable. There were more people in Cary wanting patrols and call boxes, and 4% of the families in Cary mentioned the problem with teenagers. So to think about your network, the pedestrian cyclist network, I just want to stress that it could be an urban promenade, downtown sideway, complete street, sidewalk with vegetative buffer, shared use pathway, neighborhood footpath, or wilderness trail, that we should view the whole network and look at opportunities for play and nature along the entire network. And when it gets right down to it, there's very fine differences between some of these categories. So we want to look for opportunities to provide nature and play along all of these network components. So now I'm going to give you 10 ideas for incorporating nature and play into your safe routes to and from school and park and playgrounds. And I've added these extra words because I think it's important to remember that the safe route home from school is when children have more time, can be more relaxed and have more opportunities to potter about or engage with nature and their friends. Also, kids should be able not only to reach schools, but the parks and playgrounds, which are so important for the health, like Fran mentioned, of children. So number one, find opportunities for routes to connect children to schools, markets, parks, and playgrounds. Now, the neighborhood on the existing, if this were a child, this is a real neighborhood. And if a child lived here, currently they have to go out along the street, down along the main street to access the school. If this cul-de-sac here had another connection, or this cul-de-sac had a little greenway connection added to the major greenway, the children could just spend this little bit of time on the residential street and then access the school from the greenway. That would give them the opportunity to engage with nature, to be more independent, and to avoid that vehicle traffic. And a lot of neighborhoods have these little cul-de-sacs and areas that if someone had thought of, or maybe in the future can think of, just adding that little footpath, then there's an opportunity there for play and that nature contact and avoiding vehicle traffic. So curving, interesting lines versus straight, boring pathways. To a child, the pathway on the right is going to appear pretty boring. The pathway on the left is going to appear much more exciting. There's maybe some drama about what's going to be around the corner. And just also it looks like that there might be things to play with along the way. Of course, minimizing children's exposure to vehicle traffic, you might be able to find an opportunity in your community to have your walk-to-school event start along a greenway path, or maybe start at a neighborhood park, and then you can give the kids their little 15-minute walk through the park before they start school. It might help reduce ADHD symptoms in children so afflicted. And provide vegetation that offers shade, scenic beauty, and restorative value. Provide vegetation, large trees when you can. And again, I just want to mention that can be any part of your network. It could be the streets, the sidewalks, or hopefully the shared use path. Based on my research, it suggests that you should want to avoid dense vegetation in urban areas, that it encourages fear. Ensure visibility. This goes back to Jane Jacobs' Eyes on the Street, which many of you may be familiar with. You know, having that openness in areas, having housing nearby, gives parents the comfort that their kids are not secluded and not in danger. Where possible, add play pockets to attract children and encourage social interaction. Children do seem to be drawn to play equipment. I do think that is the ideal way to add a play pocket. It might be a swing hanging from the church. It might also be just gravel and sand and dirt, sticks to play with. There does seem to be a attraction to manufactured play equipment, but that doesn't always work along your pathway corridor. Think about loose parts for play. We have some very efficient, aggressive maintenance crews out there. We might kind of want to discourage some of that cleanup, maybe not, you know, leaf blowing that's going to make things unsafe, but how about leaving some sticks and walnuts and berries around for children to come up with their own creative games with. Plan and plant for wildlife. You know, of course, water is a draw for adults as well as children. And I want to mention that the wildlife might be birds, might be caterpillars, might be, you know, cicadas. It could be any kind of bug that children, bug or bird or animal that children find so interesting. And I always think about fun. One question I asked the parents at all 4 sites was, what benefits are most important to you along the pathway? And the #1 response, 3 out of 4 people said family fun was important. That was motivating them. Those benefits can motivate them to use these pathways. You know, also high physical activity, engaging with nature, scenic beauty, and safe travel to destinations. But I think we should always think about ways to incorporate fun, and maybe it's a bridge for them to cross. Maybe it's play equipment. maybe it's just a detail of balls or boulders to crawl on. It doesn't have to be a huge playground. It could be something small, but thinking about ways to incorporate little bits of fun along your pathway network is important. So there's my contact information, and that winds it up. Katie? Hello? So I hope you've learned ways to incorporate nature and play into your safe route to and from school, the park, and the playground.
Hey, Dina, sorry, I'd muted myself.
Oh, okay.
So thank you both. This is great, and we've got some questions. So I've unmuted Fran. Fran, you're back with us.
Great to be back. Thank you.
All right. So the first question I have is for Fran. Fran, you remember when you were talking at the beginning that there's studies that show that kids who have exposure to nature tend to be happier, healthier, and smarter?
Right.
Where could we find that information? Because that's a really good nugget.
Actually, two major sources would be, one, go to the Children in Nature Network, because that came out of those are direct quotes from Richard Louv. But also, if you go to the U.S. Play Coalition, if you just Google U.S. Play Coalition, you can go on there, and there should be some of the facts there. Otherwise, directly email me, and I'll try to pull together some of that material for you if you can't find it in those two sites. So my email is fmanel@clemson.edu.
Great. All right, Adina, this next question is for you. This one's very specific. It was asking, what are the demographics of Carey and Richardson?
Well, I looked at density, and I found them to be similar, although they appear differently because Carey is mostly a little less dense, but it does have a condominium complex which is more dense, so it's sort of balanced out in the end. But I used census data, and I looked at the age of the number of children in the neighborhood. It was very similar, and I looked at for socioeconomic, I looked at race. They're both pretty mixed neighborhoods for race. I actually think that, if I recall, there was a little bit more diversity in Richardson. And then for economic data, I looked at house ownership, and those were very similar, rental or owner-occupied, and they were very similar. I don't have that data in front of me, but if they want to write to me, I can send them. I compared, and it was close.
No, that's neat. This next question is actually for both of you. So I'm going to, Fran, I'm going to give it to you first, and then Adina, if you can follow up, I think that'd be great.
Right.
Seth is actually with the National Center, so Seth, you're cheating a little bit by coming up with this question. But this question is asking, it said, okay, so Fran had a really great point that it's important to fully immerse kids in nature. But then Adina brought up a really great point, too, saying that sometimes when we have that really dense vegetation, it can cause fear for parents. So if you both wouldn't mind, how would we reconcile the two? Where do we find our happy medium? What is your advice?
I'll go first on that. I can give an example. When I was director of Florida State Parks, I had a wonderful trail that was in the Tallahassee area on the way to Wakulla Springs direction. Well, we had wonderful vegetation, and we had developed that trail through funding from enhancement money. But anyway, in doing it, we try to leave the natural vegetation as much as possible, but we did need to thin that down, not eliminate it. So it's a balance there, because of the fact that there was opportunities for people to actually have to might hide in the woods. We had a couple incidents, in fact, where we even had to go as far in one particular section, removing some of that vegetation back. But it's still nature. You still have that vegetation around you. It's just you have thinned it down, giving it an opportunity that you could actually see a little bit into those areas. And we did at one point have one section that, even with the thinning of vegetation, we had to put some telephone or solar type phones in case someone was feeling some jeopardy. But we really never had any major incidents, but it was something that we had to address.
Adina, what are your thoughts? Thank you.
My thoughts are it's an obvious conflict, and it's something that comes up when I present this. And my thoughts on it are that if we want to encourage independent mobility and children's access to the environment in urban areas, that we're going to have to make some careful choices about how we do the vegetation. And, you know, I grew up in Northern California roaming the woods where, you know, probably I was at greater danger from being attacked by a bear or a mountain lion than a human. And but it's a different time now. And, you know, we have more kids. Over 70% of the, you know, people in the country are now living in urban areas. So we maybe have to approach urban areas where kids are living differently than we have in the past. And, you know, there's some good research about that sense of enclosure. Some people have looked at just providing trees with some low-growing plants in these urban areas, and that tends to give people the feeling of openness, the feeling of safety. So, you know, thinning out some of the undergrowth like Fran talked about in urban areas is, I think, a reasonable solution. I know it's not easy. I know that people want dense nature, but I do think it's going to restrict children's movement. So it's just something that has to be decided by the community. And I think selective areas may need to be more open. So I don't have a good solution for a one-size-fits-all solution, but I do think it's something that should be discussed in the community.
Adina, I think that's such a smart point that it's not going to be a perfect black and white answer, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. You're going to have to look at your community and think critically about what works for you and be attuned to those needs. Well, I think this was good. I think we're going to wrap up. I just wanted to share with both of you because you guys can't see the questions, but someone just wrote in and said, excellent presentations, and I'm full of ideas right now. So thank you both for being very inspirational for us today, and we thank you guys. And if you guys have more questions, submit your questions to the National Center. We'll do our best to answer them.
Well,
thanks again to our presenters. I think this wraps us up.
Thanks for letting us join, and thanks for the good work that everyone's doing that's all, on this webinar, because they are connecting people to nature. Hopefully some of our material will help give you further support for doing your work and justifying budgets, etc.
Hear, hear. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.